the industry is at a very interesting crossroads where we have old meeting new, but it isn't actually something that we haven't been at before, because the industry is always at this concept of old meeting new.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners, and welcome to the 144th episode of the Shipping Podcast. I hope that you're well and not too upset with me for postponing the release of this episode by 1 week. That was the first time in 5 years that the Shipping Podcast was not released on the Shipping Podcast Friday. There are a lot of reasons for me switching to uneven weeks from now on. Not the least that now I don't have to think about releasing an episode on Christmas Day 2020. So in this episode you will be meeting the new president of the Nautical Institute. Her name is Jillian Carson Jackson, and she has just taken on the role of being the president. The Nautical Institute is a thriving membership organization, open to all those with a professional interest in the control of seagoing ships and other maritime matters. So I hope you will enjoy my chat with Jillian. The interview was done over Zoom, but I hope you will find the sound quality to your expectations. This is me making the most of the fact that I cannot meet people in real life right now. So here is Jillian Carson Jackson for you. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jillian Carson Jackson, and I am currently the president of the Nautical Institute. I live in Canberra, Australia, but I am Canadian, so I don't sound very Australian.
No, you don't.
I originally started my career with the Canadian Coast Guard, and then I moved to Paris, and then I moved to Australia. So that sort of gives you a little bit of how I ended up here.
Yeah, across the world.
Mm-hmm.
More or less. So what is your background? What is your education?
Well, I'm a navigation officer by trade. I joined the maritime industry in 1983 as an officer cadet with the Canadian Coast Guard College. And the Canadian Coast Guard College is located in Sydney, Nova Scotia. So it's on Cape Breton Island, where I now live near Sydney, Australia.
So did you sail for a couple of years, or?
Yes, so I was a navigation officer cadet. It's a 3-year cadet program, a sandwich program. So I had about 3 or 4 months at the Coast Guard College, and then I went to sea, my first ship. I joined my first ship in Thunder Bay in January, and it was an icebreaker. It was very cold and very windy, and it was a very interesting introduction to the life on board a vessel. So I was the officer cadet for 3 years, and then I went and I sailed for a number of years, mostly on the icebreakers out of Halifax, Nova Scotia. I spent 4 seasons up in the Canadian Arctic, and I did 3 seasons in the Gulf breaking ice.
So what did you do when you went ashore?
It was very interesting because when I went to go ashore, I wasn't positive what I could do because I was a navigation officer. I had a friend of mine who were engineers, and they found roles ashore in engineering. But as a navigator, I really didn't see any crossover between my skill set and the shore, so I didn't know what to do. Initially, I went to work at RCC Halifax, the Rescue Coordination Center Halifax, and then I moved into vessel traffic services, and then I became an instructor at the Canadian Coast Guard College for maritime communications and traffic service.
So where does your passion come from for the sea? I mean, where did it all start?
I've always loved water, either frozen or wet. When I was growing up, I used to figure skate. I figure skated for about 13 years. And at one time I was skating 6 days a week, about 4 hours a day. So that was the frozen ice. And in the summertime, I spent all of my time on the water that I possibly could. My parents had a cottage on an island in Georgian Bay, which is a big bay, which is part of Lake Huron in Ontario, in Canada. And from a very early age, I was on boats, motorboats, sailboats, canoes, kayaks, in the water, on the water. I just loved being near the water.
So, how did you end up as president of the Nautical Institute?
It's a very long, roundabout story. I guess it starts back when I was in high school and I was thinking of what I might do, as everyone does at the end of high school. And I was, what should I do? Should I go to university? Should I do music? Should I do science? I love to figure skate. So I thought, okay, I'll go skate for a few years in an ice show. And I actually had originally been accepted into Holiday on Ice in Europe. I thought, great, I'll do that for a couple of years. I'll come back. I'll teach figure skating. Maybe I'll go to university, sort of plan my future that way. And then I had an issue with my knee and I wasn't able to go and skate. During all of the time when I was applying to universities, I also applied to the Coast Guard College. It so happened that the week that I got the notification that I couldn't join Holiday on Ice because of my issue with my knee was the same week that I got accepted to the Coast Guard College. So that sort of changed my entire career plan. That's what you get for planning. Try not to plan because you never know what's going to happen. So I joined the Coast Guard. I spent my time at sea, and I spent 22 years actually with the Canadian Coast Guard. And while I was with the Canadian Coast Guard, I used to read this magazine called Seaways. And it's a really great magazine, lots of information in it. And I never really thought much about where it came from. And I learned later that it is, of course, a main publication of the Nautical Institute. But at the time in Canada, it wasn't necessarily a really big branch for Nautical Institute, and I didn't know much about it. So then when I went to the Coast Guard College, during my time at the Coast Guard College, I was working in vessel traffic services, and I was working to develop international standards for VTS training. And part of that work meant that I worked with an organization called IALA, or the International Association of Marine Aids to Navigation and Lighthouse Authorities. I was offered a position to go and work with IALA as the technical coordination manager. I moved to Paris, and when I was with IALA actually had a memorandum of understanding with the Nautical Institute. And I got to know a lot more about the NI and the Nautical Institute. And I realized that I probably should be a member of the Nautical Institute. I didn't actually become one then. I waited until I got to Australia. But then I joined the NI as a member. And I started becoming much more active and realizing the breadth of knowledge within this international organization of maritime professionals, over 7,000 members, with so much energy and passion for the maritime industry. And I was brought into the industry. I really got into the Nautical Institute from the point of view of the support for the seafarer, but also the support for the maritime professional as a whole, afloat and ashore. At this time, I was also working with the Australian Maritime Safety Authority, and I was managing vessel tracking, vessel traffic. I was doing some work with pilotage, and I saw the links and the access that I had to expertise through the Nautical Institute into all of these areas. So I was secretary to my branch for a number of years, and then I became chairman of the branch. And I was also on the council of the Nautical Institute. In 2012, I became a fellow of the Nautical Institute, which was quite an honor. And it was an amazing opportunity to realize that there was this structure around the Nautical Institute that was much broader than myself, that I was part of a community of experts. In the maritime industry, there's so many aspects, so many areas of interest within the industry that no one person could possibly be an expert in the maritime industry. But we are communities of experts and we learn from each other. And at the conference that we had in Sri Lanka, where I got my fellowship, I really started to appreciate the opportunities through the Nautical Institute. I was a member of council for a while at the Nautical Institute. I got elected as a vice president. I spent a number of years as vice president of the Nautical Institute, and then I was elected as senior vice president, and I spent 2 years as senior vice president. And on the 2nd of July, of this year, I was elected as president of the Nautical Institute, which I guess it's a start, but it's also the end. It's the end of a very long process that I had this vision that wouldn't it be amazing one day to be president of the Nautical Institute? And now I am president of the Nautical Institute. It's actually the start to, well, what can I do now as president? How can I influence the industry? How can I support the areas? Especially, I have three main challenge areas that I'm working on with the Nautical Institute. Obviously, diversity and inclusion, really big part of what I do. The development of technology and how that affects the maritime professional. And learning from my experience, the energy I got from the branch network. How can we support all of the maritime professionals at a global realm by the branch networks? How can we keep that going?
Congratulations to you and to the Nautical Institute, I think. How long is your term? That was my first question. How long do we have?
It's a long process to get here, and it's a 2-year term. So 2 years as senior vice president, 2 years as president, and then I'll have 2 years as past president.
I see. Well, I was so impressed with you last year. I wanted to bring that up first with the diversity. So last year, IMO had this theme, empowering women in the maritime industry. And you did such a job. Please tell us.
That was, well, it wasn't, again, it's never any just one person. Janine Drummond and I, well, we've been working together in Nautical Institute activities in Australia for a number of years. We had the AGM and a command seminar in Sydney in 2014. And Janine and I at that time thought, surely we can do something to promote women in the industry. And Janine is an amazing woman in maritime. She's she's master mariner, been on tankers. She's been in charge of tugboats, and she's also now currently harbor master in Newcastle Port. And she's just an amazing amount of energy around that. And we were talking while we were doing the AGM. She and I were organizing all the technical, running all the presentations, and sitting up in the bio box saying, "What can we do? What can we do?" And we had these ideas and then started doing a little bit around women in maritime. And then the IMO came up with this theme for 2019. And it was just the perfect timing. So we decided to do 365 days of women in maritime. So every day of 2019, we posted on Instagram and Facebook a profile of a woman working in the maritime industry, afloat and ashore. And it was pretty exciting. And when we first got started, we weren't quite sure how we were going to do. Many people said, oh, there aren't that many women in maritime. And we sort of, yeah, right. There's so many more we could do. We were working and had to learn how to do Instagram. I had to learn how to do Instagram. It's not something that I normally do. We were putting together the profiles. We had all these pictures. How are we going to put up multiple pictures? So we started looking at different apps and used Pic Collage actually in the end. So we're having a lot of fun trying to sort this out, putting the call out to the industry. And there were a couple of times when we were wondering, okay, we're out of names. We've got to do one tomorrow. Who are we going to do? So it was a bit nerve-wracking sometimes. We took it a week each. So I would do a week and she would do a week, or we would move it around like that. And I still remember a number of times about 11 o'clock at night, I'm just about in bed going, oh, I forgot to post my women in maritime, because I knew people were so looking forward to seeing that. And I would post it up, and then within seconds, I'd get my first like, and then my second like. And it was so satisfying to do that. So the Women in Maritime 365, an amazing challenge that we were able to do in 2019. And it's now been taken on, the Women in Maritime Facebook page and Instagram have now been taken on again by another amazing woman in maritime in South Korea.
Yeah, I thought it was such a great idea. And now no one can say that there are no women in the maritime industry because you have given them the visibility. And I think that is part of what we need in the diversity box that you are looking at.
Yes.
But then you could also use your Maritime network. You said that was what you were looking into as your third task as a president, to see how not to use it, but how to make use of it. So do you have any other ideas about that, how you will go along?
From a diversity and inclusion aspect?
Well, yes, and I think you said you also had the technical aspects that you wanted to.
Yes. So the diversity and inclusion within the Nautical Institute, I started working in 2018 and 19 to get a pledge. And so the NI actually now has a pledge to support diversity and inclusion. Now we have to think how we're going to act on the pledge, because the pledge is great, it's words, but what does that mean in action? And I think one of the biggest things that we need to work on in action is that throughout our branches and around the globe, that the members of the Nautical Institute are aware of full diversity and inclusion. And that includes when they're preparing panels for events that are happening, when they're looking at arranging expertise, when they're looking at sourcing articles. There is a large opportunity for diversity. And gender is definitely the one that I've been working on, but there's a realm of diversity. So we have the diverse expertise areas. We have the diversity in age. We have such an energy around maritime that we can tap into if only we are willing to go beyond what we would normally do and actually stretch ourselves to look to see who has the skill set that we would like to promote or has a skill set that we would like to focus on, or try to think of the right word, put the point on so that we can encourage others and let others see what an amazing industry we work in. So diversity and inclusion is a really big part of that. The use of technology it links in from a diversity and inclusion because it helps even everything up. I mean, in a way, COVID-19 has been very difficult. But in some ways, it's actually opened up a lot of avenues because people are using technology more now. They are more aware of what we can be doing. And hopefully, we will continue to do this. I really do miss the face-to-face meetings. I say face-to-face because we're face-to-face right now. But I miss the actual being present in the moment meetings that we have the opportunities for. But we do have a lot of opportunity with technology to even the playing field a little bit so that many more people have the opportunity to see what's happening and to get their voices heard.
Maybe we should reveal that we have never met in person.
Yes, we should.
So we are now face to face, and we couldn't have done that without the Zoom.
Nope, it's very true.
And I think you're right. The things that was totally impossible before has now become possible and tangible, and people can understand what we are trying to say when we say we can use technical devices to do business or to meet, or I don't think we will do that forever and for every meeting, but at least from one day to another, everyone was forced to at least understand how that could be done. And I think that has been great for us.
I think it's been good for the industry, and it's been good for all levels of people working in the industry. Because when you're on a webinar, you're much closer in a way than if you're in a room with 300, 500 people. So you have this connection almost, this personal connection, because you've been able to see that person or to interact with that person. So there are some opportunities, I think, there that we have.
Yeah, and I've heard, ship owners who life must go on. So if you have to sell a ship or buy a ship, you still need to do that in spite of this pandemic and virus. So even the elderly generation have realized the benefits of at least being able to see each other and meet each other online. And we don't have to explain it to them. They have experienced it on their body.
And it is this concept of, we always talk about face-to-face, but we are face-to-face. And it does have an opportunity for connection. So just because we don't have a flight or we can't physically meet with somebody doesn't mean that we can't have meaningful and effective exchanges of information that will support industry and support the growth of the industry.
It's a little bit harder for the seafarers.
It is. And the worst, I think, most difficult part is that we are using Zoom, we're using technology, we can see each other and talk. And the seafarers may have some sort of connectivity. It tends to be WhatsApp, but they don't have the level or the bandwidth connectivity that we have. There is not this global internet connectivity with broadband band. We don't have that. It's not available. And there are many seafarers who are very isolated for quite long times. And they were, of course, counting on that time when they got to port. They can go to the Seafarer Welfare Center. They can get some free Wi-Fi. They were counting on that. And that's not possible right now.
Well, connectivity is available, but maybe not for all ships.
Yes, and connectivity does have its own limitations, but they're not for all seafarers. So the ships may be connected, and there's data being transferred to and from the ship in some manner. But the seafarers, to have access to Skype or to have access to Zoom, sometimes even WhatsApp, it takes up too much bandwidth and it's very expensive. So it can be very difficult for seafarers to be able to communicate in the way that we've come to expect and that we do all the time.
I know that there are people and companies working on that to make it a little bit easier and to make it not as expensive. So let's leave it at that.
Let's hope that, yes, I know there's a lot of work going on in this area, and people are realizing the importance of the connectivity. So if you're going to be on a vessel, and we all expect this ability to have connectivity, it also comes to the future, to get the future seafarers. If we want to have young people going to sea and having the opportunity for this amazing career that is out there, and I've been in the industry now since 1983, it's an opportunity to go into an industry that has a history and a future. So you've got a really great broad scope there. But if we can't have the connectivity, we may lose some of the best and the brightest minds that we could be using within the industry.
How do you think we could become more visible? How do you think we could catch those young people that we need to have the attention of? And also, I mean, the politicians that is now a little bit stuck when it comes to the crew change issue.
Yes, it's a difficult issue, and I wouldn't want someone looking at the maritime industry to think that this crew change issue is something that will be continuing forever, because I'm sure there will be a resolution to this. It's really difficult right now, and it's something we need to highlight. We need to get the politicians, we need to get the public behind the fact that the seafarers are the reason why we have our lifestyles that we have come to expect. If you want to go to the shops and get something off the shelf, it's because seafarers have brought it on a ship. And so we need that image to get out there. It doesn't mean that this crew change crisis, they call it the crew change crisis, I don't believe it's going to last forever. There will be an end to this. We will be sorting this out. And in fact, we are starting to see significant movement for crew changes. It's very, very good to see. But we need to keep the pressure on. We need to have those seafarers switched out. And it is a lifestyle that you do. You, as a seafarer, you go to sea. That's what you do. I'd go for 3 months or so up into the Canadian Arctic. It was wonderful. But I knew after 3 months or 4 months or 5 months that I would be going home and I'd have some time off. Now, the issue right now with seafarers is that they don't know they can get off the ship. They don't know when they can get home. And that's because of the COVID. But once we've sorted this all out, we'll go back into some new semblance of how crew changes will happen. But right now, seafarers, they are key workers. They need to be able to get the green lanes to the airports. They need to get repatriated. They need to have a pragmatic approach to quarantines. This is just something that has to happen. And in order for that to happen, we need to ensure that the politicians know about the issue and that the general public know about the issue so they can put the pressure on the politicians. The seafarers are at sea. They're on a ship. So you might have maybe 18, 20 people on a ship. I don't know, it's about as long as the Eiffel Tower is high. It's big. The chances of them having COVID are really quite slim. They're tested. There's quarantine. So it's not something that you need to be scared of in a port, if a ship comes in. You need to monitor it. You need to be on the watch. But it's not something that should stop seafarers from being able to have crew change. So it is something we need to be aware of. We need to let the public know how important it is that the ships keep moving. And we also need to let the politicians know how important it is that we, in the different ports that we're in the different countries that we are, support crew change because seafarers are key workers.
Yeah, but the crisis has also exposed that we haven't been that good at telling how important we are, that we are the backbone of global trade. And I think that has been my soapbox for a long time. We need to tell everyone how good we are. And when we do that, we also can attract the young people.
That's so true. Yes. And your work in the podcast has been able to sort of break the boundaries of what we have in our more traditional maritime environment. It's important to get the word out there beyond our own echo chamber so that people are aware how important seafaring is, how important shipping is, what the role of the maritime professional is. And it's not just the seafarers. The maritime industry is so large. To get into this industry and to work within this industry, you have a myriad of options. And you can work ashore, afloat or ashore, in technology, in human factors, there's just so much that's available, but the industry is quite in its own bubble, and we need to explode that bubble and let the industry, the benefits of this industry, be seen well beyond our own industrial borders. It's almost like we've got our own internal borders, and that doesn't help our industry and it doesn't help our society. We have shipping. Shipping is critical. If we don't have shipping, we don't have the cargo transferred. If we don't have the cargo, we don't have the economies, we don't have the lifestyle that we expect to have. So we have an opportunity right now to use this as a way to jump off and go beyond our own echo chamber, to burst our bubble, and to get the good news of what shipping is out beyond our own borders of our industry.
Amen to that. I couldn't agree more. You put it so well there, I think. So how do you see the future for shipping in general?
It's pretty exciting. There's so much happening. There's this discussion on autonomy. And of course, autonomy doesn't mean, they say unmanned. It doesn't mean that there's no crew on a vessel. So the concept of these autonomous systems is decision support tools. So the technology that's going around ensuring safe and sustainable transits, making best use of renewable energies, keeping our oceans clean, because, of course, water is so critical to everything that we have in our lives. There are opportunities at pretty much every level there to bring in new ideas and to enhance what we have been doing over the years, which is really looking at what is the end result? What are the goals? This goal-based approach. The technology can be innovative. The technology can be exciting, but at the end, we are humans, and we have to make sure we keep the human in the loop, so to speak. So the industry is at a very interesting crossroads where we have old meeting new, but it isn't actually something that we haven't been at before, because the industry is always at this concept of old meeting new. So we have this opportunity, I think, right now within our industry to keep the human in the loop, to use technology to make things safer and cleaner. But I come back to that quote from Piet Hein that when technology is master, we reach disaster faster. We want to make sure we use the technology to support the goal, So in order to do that, we need to keep the goal in mind. And that will change in different parts of the industry, but we need to know what is the end result we want and how can we get there, making best use of technology. So the industry, I think, is actually a very exciting time.
I agree. And I think that now when we are going back to, or we're not going back, we're going forward to a new reality. Now is the time when we can change things that we didn't really like before, or set new goals above the ones that we had before. I hear that people are, starting to get back into the business after the corona now. Have you heard the same thing?
Well, it's interesting because, it's almost like a chance to reset, to keep what was working and to get rid of what wasn't working. In Australia, we are in a second wave. Melbourne's still shut down. Victoria is shut down. So I don't know if it's necessarily so much as getting back into working. It's starting to rethink what we will be doing, because it's not like we didn't stop. We continued. It's just because we had COVID doesn't mean we stopped. So it's an opportunity to reset and to rethink how we work. And I think that is a really great opportunity, not just for the maritime industry, but for so many other industries.
So what is the first thing you want to reset?
Living in Australia and having responsibilities, I chair working groups at IALA and working with Nautical Institute. I was traveling way too much. So actually, I'd like to reset that and realize that I don't need to spend so much time on a plane to still be effective and have meetings and to be connected with the rest of the world. And I'd like the rest of the world to realize that too. So I think that's one thing I want to reset. We really think about, do we need to physically be somewhere to get the work done? Sometimes, yes, definitely. Sometimes that will have to be there. But I think that's one thing I've reset. And I'm trying to think of what else. The other part I've reset is looking at training. I do a lot of training. I'm an educator, maritime education and training. And I have been thinking about how to make that training more accessible and more available. And we come back again to the seafarers. Seafarers spend time on ships and then they must go and maintain their certificates by doing training. So they actually get off the ship and then they have to go and spend some of their holiday time or some of their effort to be trained. I think it's important that we reset and look at how we're doing our education and training and our competence, to look at opportunities to make that more accessible and accept the fact that people need time to be themselves, to be with themselves, to have breaks, to have time away. And it's not a 24/7 aspect. If they're ashore, if they're on their time off, why are we requiring them to go and spend 2-3 weeks at a training institute, again, away from their families to be trained? Are there other opportunities? Mm-hmm. Once again, there'll be some times when you have to be together, team building, teamwork, bridge resource management training, bridge maritime team building. But do we need to have, how can we make our systems keep the human in the loop? Not just the technical systems, but our overall system of ensuring competence and training and ongoing learning, continuous professional development. How can we keep the human in the loop there? And what are some of the learnings we can take from this time when we've used technology to do so much to bring that into the future and make it more accessible?
Good. It goes along the lines of distance learning. Maybe that could be used more, at least, also in our industry.
I think so. And I think that there are many maritime education and training institutes that are working towards that line. These training courses, though, they are accredited and approved by the competent authority, for example, to meet the STCW requirements. And within that framework, there has been traditionally a requirement for certain things to happen for them to be able to meet that. So it might be time to look at our approval, the accreditation of the training process, what can be done. And I think it already has been done in some areas. It's really good to see this happening. And then when we start looking at the model courses, the IMO model courses, maybe we could be reviewing them and revising them to see where the opportunities are for better access or accessible training.
I have a tip there, because I've listened to and heard some female seafarers say that maybe it shouldn't all be he or him in those documents and books and so on. So there goes another tip for you to change.
There's a lot of work to be done in those, yes, definitely. And there's a model course 6.09, for example, which is the model course for maritime education and training. So the train the trainer one. There's nothing really in there about how to teach, how to develop courses for delivery via Zoom. So that is an opportunity that we could be doing to give our teachers the skill sets, the maritime educators the skill sets. Back when I was, probably back in the 90s, I wrote an article for Safety at Sea International. It's called Who's Training the Trainer? And I was really quite concerned about how we were going about maritime education and training. And I think that actually was the little first gem, that little seed that was planted in my own training and thoughts for how I was going to train into the future, which resulted in the Simulation Instructor Handbook that I put out from, which was published by the Nautical Institute. And I'm now looking to update it as well, because I think it's important that we clarify how we train, that we're very aware of the objectives. What are we trying to teach? What are we trying to achieve? And we look at the very best options on how to achieve that. So, yeah, I think that we have an opportunity to reset how we train and how we address training in maritime education and training.
And also maybe we should look into how we describe a career in the maritime industry. If you enter as a seafarer, are you going to be a seafarer for the rest of your life then? Or are there any other opportunities, and how are they presented when you are in that decision mode of entering the industry?
It isn't a straight decision tree, is it? I mean, I never would have thought that I would be living in Australia and be president of the Nautical Institute back when I joined the Coast Guard College in 1983. I mean, I just wasn't in my mind. It's not a linear progression. You move, it's organic. There are so many opportunities in the industry. And yes, we need to look at describing the career. In fact, you can be very effective in the maritime industry and not have been a seafarer. Vessel traffic services, there's many opportunities to work within the industry. You may never have been a seafarer, but it's still part of the maritime industry. It's all so exciting. It's a bit of an organic approach, and it's almost like a mind map. I have this sort of image of a mind map, and you can say, oh, I could do this, and then maybe I could move over there, and maybe I could do something else. And it's linked because it's that knowledge base that you have, and every job that you do brings you something more and brings you an opportunity to give something back to the industry.
I agree with you. I totally agree with you. And I get to hear that from time to time, that this podcast is like that mind map. It opens up a new bit of the mind map to see, oh, I can do that as well, because they've listened to one of my guests telling about what they do in their everyday job. But there also are people who are, if I want to become a lawyer, I know that I will have to study law, and then I will have to go into a law firm, and then I will, I know the career for me the coming 5 years, then I will get that. Mm-hmm. But I can't really see that in our industry at all. So maybe, there are career paths that could be shown to people who doesn't really know what happens if I go to sea. Will I be stuck there then?
And there are opportunities. I think I've seen a few things online with different career paths, but I would love to see opportunity that we can share. Maybe it's something we could work on. We could work on developing a career path mind map that people could jump in, and you can jump in and out. So you might be in the maritime industry for a while. Maybe you go off and do something else, and you come back into the industry. So we have that. When it comes to the opportunities of mentoring, so we haven't talked about mentoring. That's one thing I'm really quite big on. And there's opportunities, I believe, in the industry to do mentoring. And right now we have pockets where mentoring's happening. I'd like to see almost, I don't know how, because everyone gets the little mentoring program up and running and they want to keep their mentoring program going. But mentoring is a really important opportunity to sort of highlight these different career paths that you could be doing. And through mentoring, there's that two-way link, that relationship as well. So there are new career paths within the industry opening up right now as we speak because of the technology developments, because of the data analytics, the vessel tracking information. There's a lot of areas within the maritime industry that are growing. They're growth areas. And perhaps some people in the more traditional roles, if they had a mentor-mentee relationship, they'd actually learn more about them from the mentee. So the mentor-mentee relationship is something you can grow. The ship-to-shore side, when I first came ashore, remember I said at the very beginning, when I came ashore, I had no idea what I could do ashore. I knew I didn't want to be at sea anymore. We haven't gotten into any of that reasons why I left the ships. But I didn't want to be at sea anymore. I loved the job, but I didn't want to be at sea anymore. So I needed to find a role ashore. And I had no idea what to do. There was nobody there to say, I could have gone into any of a large number of jobs. And the only thing I could think of was Rescue Coordination Center, because that's the only other place I knew where someone with navigation skill set could work. So it was really difficult. I think that the opportunity to provide that career path, to provide mentoring when people, especially when they want to come from ship to shore, because it's a big change. It's huge. It's bigger than I ever thought it was going to be. I went into a shift work job thinking, okay, I've been working shifts on a ship. At that time, we were doing 6 and 6, 28 on, 28 off. I'll go into shift work. That'll be fine. It's so different ashore. And you're doing shift work in an industry where it's built around shift work on a ship. Everyone else is working shifts. It's not a problem. You come ashore and you're working shift work. Everybody else is working day work. And it's just a huge problem. You lose a lot of that connection of the feeling of the family on the ship that you have, because now you're working and you're much more isolated. You go home at night and you go home at night. It's so different. I really wish I'd had someone help me with that as a mentor, to tell me what are the opportunities and to let me get my head around what it really was going to be to be ashore in a shore job and working ashore, not just to be ashore for holidays and then go back to sea, but to be ashore for the full time. And it was a very long time for me to get into that realm, into that feeling of what it was like to work ashore.
So do you want to go into the reasons for why you left the sea?
I had to be twice as good to be accepted as being half as good. And that just got really, really tiring.
Did you have a role model growing up?
This is a really good question. Did I have a role model? Well, of course, one of my major role models was my father, who was a very astute man, very good in the maritime. He loved his boats and he made everything work. But he actually worked in Bell Canada with telephones. So I guess from a communications point of view as well. From a fictional character point of view, I just love the Hornblower books. So Horatio Hornblower always struck me as being, if I could be a ship's officer like Horatio Hornblower, that was always wonderful. From a strong female point of view, when I was doing my confirmation class, it was a 13-year-old or 11-year-old, I can't remember how old I was. The person leading my confirmation class was one of the first 3 female Anglican ministers. And up until that time, of course, within the church, I was always seeing men. And it was really, I think, at that point when I realized that a woman can do pretty well anything. And that was pretty exciting. I had my father, who was very, very strong and had me helping him doing everything, never thought of me being a daughter as opposed to a son. He only had daughters anyway, so if he wanted to get anything done, he had to use us. And then this fictional thought of the maritime, what it would be like to be at sea. And then that was all sort of topped off with this fact that women can do anything. There's nothing really stopping us.
Who do you think I should interview the next? Who would you be interested in listening to in the Shipping Podcast?
I'd be interested in listening to Francis Zachary from the Secretary General of IALA. I think that could be very interesting from the point of view of what IALA is doing And also linked to that, it would be very interesting to learn a little bit more about the work that's happening in Japan from the point of view of the supporting of the digital data technology and exchange aspect. I can't think of the exact name of somebody for that, but it would be very interesting to hear about that. I have another person who's a woman actually too.
Okay, of course.
Miss Hyun-hee Koo is a very interesting woman who has been very active in the 3GPP development from the maritime side, working to promote a maritime, what they call a maritime vertical, or specific use cases for maritime in the development of LTE, 4G, 5G. And so it could be very interesting be very technical, very technology, but it'd be very interesting to get her thoughts on the future of connectivity for ships.
Okay, good. I was thinking of someone closer to me. There is a Swedish company working on that, but of course, I want to listen to her views.
Yeah, well, she's in charge under the 3GPP standardization framework. She's the one who has in charge of the maritime verticals. But yes, if you have someone closer to you as well, then that might be good.
Well, I think people might be listening to different opinions and different views of the same question. I think that is what I'm doing in this podcast. Thank you very much, Jillian. Thank you for being a guest on the Shipping Podcast, and best of luck with your work. Thank you, Jillian. I think you are one of the leaders that the maritime industry needs right now. I'm happy for you, and I'm happy for the Nautical Institute. And I agree with you that we need to pull together, all of us, and reset the goals that we have for the future of the maritime industry. I think during the pandemic, we all have had time to think about other things than we usually think about. And many of us has come to a few realizations about the weak spots in this industry and where we need to shape up in order to survive. Let's agree on the fact that the reset of the society as a whole is also an opportunity for us. I will leave you with that thought and just say, until the next time, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a Shipping Podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.